sure we'll get another one. She's like, I will. She's like, we'll get one in the spring. I'm like, well, dude, that's not gonna really work because nobody's gonna be on the train. I said, let's just wait till summer when you're off from school, you know, and then we can, you know, because we're gonna go down to my daughter moved to Charleston, South Carolina, so we're going down there for 5 or 6 days. Rent a house right on the beach, you know.
Well, that's what it is.
It would be if we had it. I wouldn't take a puppy. Yeah, because I'm going to be, you know, I don't want to be babysitting a puppy all the time.
Yeah, no, you don't.
So, but, yeah, so I figured this summer we'll have somebody in. We'll see.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to First Presbyterian Church. I'm Clint Tolbert. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're so glad that you are joining us, and we're very glad to have with us today the Toledo Symphony Jazz Trio. Before you are Kevin Korecki and Norm Damschroder and Keith McWatters, and we're just so blessed to have them here, as you will hear shortly. Before we begin our recital, just a few announcements I want to make you aware of. Again, this is a monthly recital series, and so we hope that you will make plans to return, that you will bring a friend with you. Hopefully you received a program on your way in, and you will, on that program, notice next month's recital. We will be joined by 7 graduate students from Bowling Green State University, a string quartet, and a flute, piano, and glockenspiel. Believe it or not, I played a glockenspiel when I was a little kid in Kindermusik. I'm sure this person will play it much better than I did a long time ago. This concert will feature a mix of musical works from the classical era and from most recent years as a mini survey of classical music across time. So we hope you'll bring a friend and join us at that time. I hope you noticed when you came in there is a table just outside the entrance. That is there. If you would like to give us your name and an email address, we will put you on our email list so that you have information that comes directly from us. Like I said last month, we do our best to give accurate information to communication partners, but sometimes that gets a little bit mixed up. And so if you want to make sure that you are being communicated with accurately and directly, please give us your email. Finally, if you have a cell phone with you, would you check it one more time to make sure it is off or that it is silent? And if you have time, we would love for you to join us downstairs after the recital for coffee and cookies. It's cold outside. Just delay going out there as long as you can and enjoy the warmth of fellowship that you can downstairs. Will you pray with me? And then we will begin. Oh Lord, we give thanks for this day that you have made. We give thanks for the fellowship of this community. We give thanks for the musicians who are joining us and blessing us. We give thanks for the gift of music. And we pray, Lord, that you would indeed lift our spirits, help us to enjoy that which you have made. And bless this afternoon to the glory of the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. Please welcome the Toledo Symphony Jazz Trio.
very much for that introduction. And it is an absolute pleasure to be here. We are the Toledo Symphony Jazz Trio, and you don't usually think of the word symphony and jazz in the same sentence, in the same thought, but it is in fact true that we do our time in the Toledo Symphony playing with the orchestra, playing the glockenspiel, and we also play small ensemble jobs. And this happened, the Jazz Trio thing is a really nice opportunity for us to get out and do a different type of music. Jazz music is quite different from classical music, and we'll get into a little bit of that. But before we get going too far, I do want to reintroduce my keyboard player today. Our keyboard player today is Mr. Kevin Korecki. If you put your hands together for Kevin, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. And already playing our first tune back here behind us, he was in a hurry, so he got started without us. This is Mr. Damschroder on a big old bass. Give it up for him. Thank you very much. I'm the drummer. My name's Keith. Give it up for Keith. All right, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we are going to play jazz music. As I say, we do play in the orchestra, and the orchestra is quite different from a jazz trio. And let me tell you really quickly what that's all about. When you have 85 or 90 musicians on stage, in order to keep them all together, you have to have a conductor, and that person is in charge. And we all play from music, pieces that go sometimes, as you're probably well aware, 45, 50 minutes long for one piece. I may count for 40 minutes, stand up, play the triangle once, and sit back down. But it beats working for a living. Anyway, that type of music is a very disciplined type of music. You start at the top left of the music, and you end at the bottom right of the music. If you play something wrong, you're wrong. You will lose your job. You can't play anything wrong in the orchestra. With 85 people playing, everybody's got to be in the same place at the same time. And that's why you have to have a conductor. This group, not quite as much discipline, and that's a good thing, because we like to get out of the kennel once in a while and fool around a bit, get off the chain. So in jazz, the big difference is, because there aren't 85 of us, we can improvise, and that's a word that I want to stick with you a little bit if you haven't heard it before. Improvisation is what makes jazz music different from classical. Although there was some improvisation back in Mozart's day, not a whole lot, because when you have 85 people on stage, they all need to be behaving, staying in the same place in the music. We can fool around a bit, and we do. So before we get too far into all of this, we are going to talk a little bit about jazz, going to talk a little bit about our instruments, but right now we're going to start with a tune that is the first thing we want to point out. This is a blues. And as you learn a little bit about jazz today, first thing to learn is that the blues doesn't have to be sad. A lot of times people will say, oh, he's singing the blues today, and it's like, oh, boo-hoo. Well, blues does not need to be sad. This blues is particularly cool. It's about an old road that goes across the United States called Route 66. This is what we call a standard, and it is a blues. It's just simply a form of jazz music. The blues can be slow, it can be fast, it can be sad, it can be happy. This one is happy, and it goes something like this. Well, if you ever plan to motor west, travel my way, take the highway, that's the best. You'll get your kicks on Route 66. Well, you'll go from Chicago to L.A., more than 2,000 miles along the way. You'll get your kicks on Route 66. Well, you'll go through St. Louis, Joplin, Missouri, Oklahoma City looks mighty pretty. See Amarillo, or hey, Gallup, New Mexico, Flagstaff, Arizona, don't forget Winona, Keystone, Bucko, San Bernardino. If you get hip to this timely tip, when you take that California trip, get your kicks on Route 66. All right, Kevin, improvise for us. Joplin, Missouri, Oklahoma City looks mighty pretty. See Amarillo, hey, hey, Gallup, New Mexico, Flagstaff, Arizona, don't forget Winona, Keystone, Boston, San Bernardino. If you get hip to this timely tip, when you play that California trip, get your kicks on route. Get your kicks on route. Get your kicks on route. Route 66. Thank you very much. So, I was going to say not a bad thing, but not a sad thing, let's say. That is the blues. And the blues, you can see all different types of blues, and a lot of different composers and arrangers have done things in the blues. So what we're going to do right now, though, that's just sort of an opener. We don't really, the blues doesn't fit into our historical perspective all that great. But what we're going to do now is go back in time to where jazz sort of got its start. We're not going to go back as far as spirituals and things like that, which is, of course, a lot of the background of jazz it gets that far back. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to when jazz started to become popular. And where that was, in our estimation, is the ragtime period. And ragtime, it's an interesting name. Ragtime gets its name from the music being raggedy. Typically what you would have is you would have either a small band or just a piano player playing a bass line that was very steady. And then on the other end of things, the higher instruments in the band, maybe you'd have the tuba and the bass drummer and maybe a trombone player playing a very steady bass line. And then on the other end, the right hand on the piano or the higher instruments in the band would be playing music that was very syncopated. So where you might have a very steady beat, you'd have going on, very syncopated, like really out there, raggedy. It was almost like somebody had torn the music and the edges were ragged. So it became ragtime music. Now ragtime became very popular in a setting where it was the only place you could get live music, is to go buy some sheet music, find somebody who could play the piano, and then ask them to play the sheet music. There weren't records yet. And you had live music or you had none. So this became very popular because people learned to play the piano well enough to read some of this old ragtime music, and it was a cool thing. Vaudeville had. You might go to see a comedy show, and before the comedy there'd be a piano player playing ragtime music or something. So ragtime got its start as sheet music, played maybe in just somebody's living room on an old beat-up piano. This is a beautiful piano with a beautiful piano player. We're gonna ask Kevin to entertain us a little bit with a ragtime piece you'll recognize, Scott Joplin, The Entertainer. such a big mouth anyway. I think most of you heard what I had to say. I mean, isn't this great? Now, that's not to suggest that Scott Joplin was writing back before vaudeville and all that sort of thing, but that's a style of music that was very popular back in those days, ragtime music, and quite likely the most difficult thing Kevin will do here today, if I'm without question. Yeah, you're going to hear him do some amazing things, but that kind of music is pretty difficult. So thank you, Kevin. And what we were doing there, if you notice, Norm and I were just sort of coming and going, may I play a little bit? No, I'm not. Now I'm going to play a little bit. We were improvising. If we were to play that tune again, it would not be the same. We could play it right now, and we would play it, but it would not be the same as we just did, because we improvised so much of it. Norm played notes that he won't remember that he played, and it'll sound different the next time around. I'm terribly inconsistent, so everything's different every time I play. But the improvisation thing is what, as I mentioned, is what makes classical music so different from jazz music or vice versa. And improvisation is why we do what we do, because it allows us to go out and create in our art form, to go out and make music, to make it up, to compose it right here in front of you. Now, you don't see a lot of music, and what's interesting is I'm talking about sheet music, and he just, plays a ragtime piece on an iPad, which is, it's like, okay, we kind of come full circle. Yeah. But you don't see a lot of music up here, because in this group, we kind of just know what we're going to do. We played the tunes enough that we don't have to read music. If we're reading a 45-minute Brahms symphony, we kind of have to have the music in front of us, because it goes all over the place, and it lasts a long time. But in the jazz group, we don't have to. It's because we improvise. We improvise a lot. We take the start of a tune, the melody that you would recognize, and then we improvise. Everything we do really is improvised. Even though you will recognize the tune, if we play the tune again in a second, for the second time, it won't be the same. Improvisation comes to play in the next style of music we want to visit in our little history trip, and that is the big band era. And that's when jazz music really started to take off, and there were a couple of reasons. Again, if you wanted music, you had to go someplace where there was live music. We didn't have vinyl yet. We didn't have 8-tracks, cassettes, CDs, floppies, whatever. We didn't have any of that. So if you wanted to hear music, you had to go where it was live. And that was where the big bands came into play. And the big bands played for big audiences. Hundreds of people dancing, clinking their dishes, and making enough audience noise that you had to have a band bigger than this. So the big bands became very popular. And the big bands, you probably all know, the big bands had trumpets, trombones, saxophones, a rhythm section like this, maybe a guitar player, and maybe a singer. And the big bands became very popular because people could dance to it. You had a whole room, hundreds of people, and everybody dancing the foxtrots and all the swing music that was so popular. Big band became very popular. So we're going to play an example of big band as we take our next step in the history. And the thing we want to introduce now is Norm is going to improvise a solo in this. We're going to play a big band tune called Satin by Duke Ellington. And we will play the tune, and then Kevin and I will back away a little bit. We'll still be playing, but we'll get out of Norm's way, and he's going to improvise. He's going to make us something up. He has rules to follow. He can't just go off on a tangent and not pay any attention to the chord changes in the music that's written. But he does have rules to follow, but he's going to make something up fresh and brand new today. And if we were to do it again, like I said, it would be different the next time he does it. But he will improvise. We'll come back in, we'll play the melody once or twice more, and then we'll finish the tune. But listen for Norm to play this solo, and also listen for Kevin and I, because what's happening is Kevin and I want to hear what Norm has to say musically. And we want you to hear what Norm has to say. So we'll back away. I'll play quietly, Kevin will play quietly and play less, and Norm gets to show off. So this is Satin from the big band era. was an example of big band music, and you can imagine, I mean, maybe you even felt like, geez, I'd get up in the aisle here and dance. No extra charge if you want, help yourself. But we're gonna make it a little more difficult because we're actually gonna go to a different type of music that's not very danceable. Because what's happening now is you're on the bandstand for 4 hours and people are dancing, they're having a blast, we're having a blast. Norm got to improvise, and that was fun. Kevin did a little improvising, that was fun, but I'm just back there playing the time. It's like, okay, so for 4 hours, it's like, is there something else to life maybe? And what's beginning to happen is there's more and more improvisation on stage. Bass might do it, saxophone might do it, trumpet might, another saxophone, keyboard would. People are starting to improvise. It's actually put into the music. You know, you play a little bit of what's written, and then there's a section that says open for solos. And what that means is anybody that wants to raise their hand can play a solo. Well, you can't kind of do that in a dance scenario because the tune would start to get, you know, like 15, 20 minutes long, and people would be like, come on, I've had enough dancing. So didn't happen at the dance. It didn't happen at the dance, but the improvisation was starting to get some momentum because this is what we want to do. If you think of it this way, I'm going to be real quick. Music is a language just like English, just like if you were to read a good book. Brahms' Symphony is a good book. And you start at the beginning, you read it from the beginning to the end, it's always the same, it never changes. The book is what the book is. And we could all read it together. You read the first page, and you read the second page. But if you read it and you read it wrong, you're wrong. Jazz is a little bit different. What jazz allows us to do is take that language, take what we've learned in the book, close the book, and then put what we learned from the book into motion. That's where improvisation kicks in, and that's where we get to create, and that's why we're here today. That's why we love jazz. It gives us an opportunity to take the language we have worked so hard to understand and take it the next step, which is create our own book. Instead of reading just words that somebody else wrote, we're going to make our own words up, and we're going to work together to make a really cool book. And I'm going to listen to what Norm has to say. That's why Kevin and I got out of the way when Norm was speaking. He had something to say. Okay, Kevin's got something to say, so I'm going to back away a little bit. In a second, I'm going to have something to say. You're going to want to cover your ears, but that's okay. We're going to play a tune now from the next type of music that we go from the bandstand where people would play 3-4 hours of background music for people to eat and then dance and eat. And at the end of those 4 hours, some of the folks would say, I haven't had enough. I would love to go someplace with my buddy Kevin and my buddy Norm and make some more music. I would like to improvise. I got some ideas, and I want to do that. So they would go to a club, a musician's club, and they invented sort of kind of a style of music called Bebop. And Bebop was not very danceable. It was technical, and the tunes would go on sometimes forever. Because what would happen is you'd have a rhythm section to be up here cooking, and then you'd have a sax player come up, put his horn together, and play for 10 minutes. And then a trumpet player would be like, wow, I got some idea. And he'd put his trumpet together, and he'd play for 10 minutes. And then you'd get somebody like Ella Fitzgerald to sing along. And then you'd get a flute player. And then you get another sax. A song could go on for a half hour with these guys just cooking and laying down a groove so that everybody could improvise. It was the most creative opportunity for jazz at the time. It's called Bebop music, and we're going to play Anthropology by Charlie Parker, one of the best sax players like ever. Anthropology from the Bebop era. Oh, I'm done. I'm improvising. What you'll notice is we're gonna play the tune. And you'll notice it's not very danceable. A lot of notes. Kevin's gonna play the tune. Kevin's gonna take some solos. He's gonna improvise. Then we're gonna let Norm improvise. And then we're gonna do what's called trading fours. Fours are just a little section of the tune, and it's gonna be Kevin and then me. Norm, and then me, Kevin, then me, Norm, and then me. We're going to just trade back and forth. All the time following the rules that are in this Anthropology tune. But this is Bebop, and it gives you a chance to hear what improvisation was happening at the clubs after the dance band. Yes. Oh, you're waiting for me, aren't you? Wait. Okay.
Come on, 2, 3, 4.
Bebop. That's bebop style of music, and you can see where that would be just like a blast to play. And that song might go on for 30 minutes while we get different soloists up front. The important thing that's happening there is that the rhythm section this is what this is called. The jazz trio is a rhythm section, keeps the rhythm. Is that we have to keep creating. Yes, a song like that could go on for 30 minutes. If we did just the same thing over and over again for 30 minutes, a couple of things would happen. People would start to leave because it's like, this is starting to get boring. And then there would be no energy for the saxophone players and the trumpet players to come up and play the solos. What gives them their energy is a rhythm section that cooks. And that's our job. And I do want to talk, I want to kind of take a left turn away from the history for a moment. We've been through the ragtime and the dance band and the bebop era. We're going to get to one more era. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit about what the rhythm section does. And I know you've all seen a set of drums. You've all seen piano, of course, and the bass. The big bass might not have gotten this close to. And there's a reason for that. It's really not a safe instrument to be this close to. So I'm starting to get a little nervous. But you may not have seen the bass that close up before. But what I'd like to do now is take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about our instruments and what we do in this group, because it's kind of interesting, especially with a couple of tunes left. You can listen and go, oh, I see what he's saying. Because it really is, there is some things that are going on. And as the drummer, the first and foremost thing we do, especially back in the day when we were playing vaudeville and then the big band era, the one assignment we had was to keep the time. And when musicians say, you need to keep better time, or you need to keep the time, that doesn't mean that I look at my watch a lot. It means that I keep the speed of the song. When we say time, we mean the tempo or the speed of the song. Once a song gets started, especially in the dance area, in the dance era where people were dancing, if we start a dance tune and people go, oh, I love this, and oh man, this is, and they start dancing, and then the drummer loses track and he slows way down, and the dancers will be like, what's going on? This is no fun anymore. Or worse yet, if he speeds up, that's actually hilarious if you go really fast and the dancers are like, whoa, I thought I was going to have. Anyway, the time, the speed of the song is actually very important. So that's item one. And I use tools to keep the time, sticks. Okay, I have sticks that are wooden. I have wooden sticks that have plastic tips. I have wooden sticks that have a ball on the end, and sometimes that ball is wrapped in yarn. I have brushes. You saw me use the brushes in the dance band era. I have a mixture between sticks and brushes that are called blast sticks, which are plastic dowels, really small dowels, and there's probably like 30 of them connected to a wooden handle, and it sounds like brushes, but I can play really hard, so it can sound like sticks, but it's not as loud as sticks. Anyway, lots of tools to help keep the time. And I'm going to go back to the drums right now, Bill. I'm going to go use that microphone if that's all right. I'm going to go back to the drums and show you just something real quick. So while I'm grabbing these different items, and you got to understand, it's not just because I wanna. I'm trying to keep that energy flowing for the rest of the band. And if I do things that are interesting to Norm and Kevin, to their ears while they're playing, and they hear me do a little something different, they're like, oh, thanks, that's cool. Yeah, and then they get into a different groove. And all of a sudden we're doing something we've never done before. We'll probably never do it again. But there's always things we can do. So I have plastic tips and just different size cymbals, different size drums, simple. Both my hands, both my feet are busy. Right foot, left foot. Keeping the time. And the way I do that, I do it in two different ways. I simply ride the cymbal. This is called a ride cymbal. And then I tap my feet. So that's keeping the time. And that's my point. If I was to just keep the time, you'd all be like, I'm out. But what I do is I keep the time while I'm coloring things. And when we talk about color in music, it's color that you see with your ears, not color that you see with your eyes. Don't care about reds and yellows, it's just there's colors going on. And it depends on which cymbal I use, whether or not this is open or closed. Lots of different sounds up here. And so you sort of give an artistic license to mess around as long as you stay within the rules. So I have two colors in particular that I will use in a jazz trio. One is that swing color. Another one is more of a rock style which is simply Latin style, and it is a different feel altogether. It feels like this. Okay, that's obviously very different from anything we've played. So far, everything we've done has had a swing feel. This Latin feel is different. We'll probably play a quick example in a few minutes here where I'll go from swing to Latin so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And it's not important that I'm doing that, except that it buys into what I was telling you, where I need to use different things, different ways, to color the tune differently for everyone's ears. So just about the time everybody in the band is like, can we have a switch? I'll do something different. I can't do anything different without everybody else doing it with me. If I go into Latin and they're still swinging, you'd immediately think, something's wrong. This does not feel right anymore. So there will be times where it'll be like, let's do Latin. We'll talk about it a little bit and we'll shift into it together. It's important that we all move on the same thing together. So that's pretty much basic what the drums do. I'm going to ask Norm to take the mic here and talk a little bit about this big old bass and one other thing that he has up here. Oh, take it away, Norm, man.
This is the double bass. That's what we like to call it, the bass players do. It's also called upright bass, stand-up bass, string bass, bull fiddle, doghouse. It's got all kinds of crazy names. We call it the double bass. Yes, there was a single bass back, a few centuries ago. A smaller instrument, the viol, from the viol family. And this is a traditional bass instrument in jazz. We can also have the tuba, the left hand of the piano player can be doing it, or pedals on an organ. Even I've heard of bass saxophone doing the bass line in a jazz group, which is crazy because that I think of the instrument as being the God. So, just a huge saxophone. And in an orchestra, we normally play, you see, say, anywhere from 4 to 8 bass players in an orchestra, and they're usually playing with a bow, right? A stick with hair from a horse's tail on it, and some sticky pine sap called rosin, and we drag it across the strings and we get this. Sustained sounds. And we, of course, it's the lowest member, lowest frequency of the string family, so we can get pretty high, but we can get very low. And in a jazz group, we have a tendency to play more with our fingers, what's called plucking the string or pizzicato. We do that in an orchestra, but it's more of an effect. But in jazz, we solely, most of the time, it's always playing pizzicato with an occasional long note at the end of the song with the bow, or some people will solo with the bow. So we're doing. Notice it has a sort of buoyant, bouncy sound to it. And that's why we do that. because one of our jobs as a bass player in a jazz group is to help keep the time Keith is talking about. And we have a couple of ways we do that. A couple that you've heard, one was called playing in two or two beat. We did that at the beginning of Satin. So we're playing a note on beats 1 and 3 in a 4/4 time. 2, 3. But we can also do what we call walking bass, where we're putting a note on every beat. 2, 3, 4. So that's walking. And those are ways we help to keep that time going. Now, we also have an additional responsibility in showing everyone where the harmony and the structure of the song is. So I have to choose my notes very carefully. For example, Kevin's going to play a D minor triad, a chord, 3 or more notes played simultaneously. And if I play a note underneath, go ahead, play it. Now, if I choose a different note, we get a different harmony. So I have to be very careful to choose the right notes in my walking bass line to show us where the chords are happening in the structure of the song. Because the song is the rule, if you want. You know, we follow the chord structures and the form of the song, and then when we improvise, we're making up our melodies to go across those. So we have to know the harmony of the song very well to make that work. And again, when I'm doing this walking bass line, I am in fact also improvising that, but I have to hold a little closer to the structure of the song, the rules, if you will. So, and like I said, that's the double bass, not a cello. Quick, horrible story. I had a 150 student jazz history class repeat after me, it's a bass, not a cello. Sure enough, 2 girls write on their report for me, they saw piano, drums, and a C-H-L-O-E, a Chloe. So I've called her Chloe ever since. I have one other instrument. The electric bass, or the bass guitar, is something invented by Leo Fender in about 1952. And it also can do the role of the bass, but it's in sort of guitar form. So it has the same strings, basically. So I can do the same things. I can walk bass lines. And I can solo. But I can also do things that are more rock and roll oriented. If I'm playing rock music, I would most likely be playing this instrument rather than that. Sometimes I do get called to play rock music or country, more modern country or whatever. And so we can do more rock things or what we call pop and slap style. So those are different things. So this is a little more non-traditional instrument, but most of the time, most bass players I know play both instruments depending on which style of music they need to play. And Kevin's going to talk about the piano.
Yeah, just a few things here to go with what Norm was saying. In this jazz trio type of thing, I play a role that I kind of in the melody, and I'm creating all the harmonies with my left hand, playing melody with my right hand. In a solo situation, if I'm playing solo piano by myself, I don't have the luxury of having a bass player. So if I'm playing by myself, you hear me doing more stuff with my left hand because I'm trying to fill out the whole gamut here. I have a whole range of 88 notes, which is, you know, I go from here to here. So I have quite the gamut to fill out. In the jazz trio, though, I want to stay out of Norm's way out of there. If I'm playing stuff down here, you know, I don't exactly know what he's going to play, so I just kind of stay out of the way, and I and change my left hand to more of a chordal harmony thing, so I can stay out of his way, and he can do what he's going to do because he's got his ideas how he's going to walk and fill out the bottom because that's his job. Keith, he stays and he's keeping rhythmically. I kind of do some stuff with my left hand and listen to him. If I can pick up some stuff, I will do that. And then my right hand, you hear I'll play the melodies. And I improvise, and it could be single notes, it could be chordal, it could be, it just depends on how I feel what I'm gonna do in the tune. But then, there's the other situation now, say we had an instrumentalist come in, or a female vocalist, male vocalist, whatever. Then my right hand and left hand work together more harmonizing rather than playing the melody because I have another instrument coming to take care of the top end. So I kind of fit in the middle, you know, diddle around, fill in little holes. The saxophone player plays the melody, there's a little hole. I can just put a little fill in. You know, it's just all the improvisation thing. What you feel, what comes natural, it just happens. You know, it's a thing that when you work with people for so long, you learn what their language is and you all communicate together. And it's a great thing. It really, you know, I've been playing since I've been 9 years old, and you know, I stopped for a while because I was just burned out on it, but it was really nice to get back to playing and to play with people. I play a lot of solo stuff, and during the pandemic, it was really a hard thing, you know, because I can play piano and do my thing, but it's really nice to be interactive with other musicians because that's where it's all at, is just playing with other people. So that gives you kind of a little idea of what I do over here.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is play a couple of quick courses of a tune called Green Dolphin Street. And this will show you, we're going to start with the Latin beat, and then we'll go into a swing. You'll pick it up with your ears. You'll hear the colors. You'll see the colors with your ears. But this starts Latin, and then goes into the swing, goes back and forth a little bit. Just a couple of choruses of that.
Obviously, if Norm and I had done it and Kevin hadn't, it would be like, come on guys, something's... So it's just something that you do, and you can kind of feel it. That tune is kind of laid out that way, but sometimes in tunes, you'll be going along on a swing tune and somebody will be like, hey, what if? And it's so subtle. It's very interesting. I'll hear Norm do a little something a few measures before the change, and I'll be like, I know where you're going. Or he'll hear me make a change or something, or Kevin will play some licks and it'll be like, I think he wants to. Next thing you know, we've all made the change and it's like, wow, that was cool. And that's that energy that you're looking for. And you don't know going in that you're going to do it. And when it happens, it's just like, wow, that was awesome. Okay, one last style of music that we're going to get to, because it takes us up to the rock and roll era, is a style of music called fusion. And fusion is exactly what it sounds like. Two types of music fused together. And this came from jazz musicians who were watching what was happening on the rock scene, and it was rock musicians listening to what was happening in the jazz scene, and there became a style of music that was a combination of rock and jazz. It could be played by a jazz trio. You didn't have to have all the blazing guitars and the Hammond organ going, you didn't have to have all that, but you could still play a rock beat on the drums. So it's like, we've just fused. We've created a new style of music, fusion. We're going to play a piece by Eddie Harris, entitled Cold Duck Time, and you'll know right off the bat, it's like, okay, this feels way different than the Latin we just played, feels way different than Scott Joplin Entertainer. Check this out, fusion music called Cold Duck Time. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much. That does bring us to the end of our historical, not hysterical, trip. And that is our last tune. But we do have just a couple minutes, and I really love it if, when we have a little bit of time at the end, are there any questions? Did we say anything, do anything that you would love to ask a question? Yes, sir. What do you... The question is, how do you transport the double bass?
Well, I have this drone that lifts in my dreams.
Amazon Prime.
I have been able to fit it in any vehicle with the exception of a 1980 Ford Festiva. So it's a matter of, I of course own an SUV, I own a CRV, so I just slide it in the back and we're good.
Now, getting it into the gig, that's a whole nother thing.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. But yeah, I've been able to put it into, you can kind of fit it into the passenger seat and wedge it in, and you know, we find our way.
That's a great question. In the old days, when I was loading more than I load now, if I was to go buy a car, a different car, a new car to me, I would take the drums. It'd be like, if it doesn't fit, I can't buy the car. Yeah. Now there's minivans and SUVs and everything, so everything pretty much fits. But in the old days, it didn't work. Was there another question? Yes, ma'am.
If you're ever not in the mood, like, you know, I know when you do classical music, you just follow the music, but when you do jazz, you kind of get into it. What if you're like not in the mood that day?
I'm not in the mood now.
Yeah, none of us are in the mood. Can you not tell? I mean, it's like, we don't want to be here. I'm surprised that you folks are here. No. It's a good question. The question, if you didn't hear it, the question was, what happens if you're just not in the mood? And it's funny, you show up and, you know, we're loading equipment. Kevin didn't, he's just a piano player, but the rest of us have to load. So it's like, you know, I load the night before so that I'm not, you know, used up by the time it's time to play. But the loading is like, oh man. And we've been at it for, well, I'm clearly the oldest one here. I've been at it for half a century. And that's a lot of drums to load. And there are times where you're like, I just don't want to go. You know, and sometimes just staying at home sounds like a good idea. And then you play the first tune. Tell me if I'm wrong, guys, but you get there and you're like, whatever, just what are we playing? Call a tune. And then you get started and it's just like, it's like whoosh, this is why you do it. And it's amazing. It's being with friends, it's being with people that you like to play with. And
it just, you know, no matter where you are, you know, how your day's been and how sad or how great a day or whatever, it just, when you come together and play, you know, even if you're sad, you go and you come because it's a love, you know, we love what we do, you know. Like he said, sometimes it's like, you know, you get paid for setting up and tearing down. That's right. You know, and you play for the fun of it.
You play for free, you pay for the load. Yeah. Yes, sir. Why do we use a sound system in such a small environment? A couple of reasons. Typically, when we play with a big piano, Norm will, that big bass, when he talked about playing pizzicato, those strings are sometimes a natural material, but more often than not, they're metal, they're steel strings. And if he has to play really loud on the doghouse, he's going to cut his fingers open. So, yeah, it'll hurt. Yeah. And so he'll either choose to play the Fender, which is because it has a volume control and it makes no sound without an amp. He'll choose to play the Fender to take care of his fingers. But when he wants to, and we like him to play the upright because that is the traditional bass in jazz. So we need him to play that. But and I can only play so quietly. And if I'm playing loud and he has to really yank on the strings, then he ends up with an injury. And when you injure yourself playing a musical instrument, it doesn't go away for a long time. You can't practice your way through a split finger. So you have to be very careful of that. Now, a lot of the mics that you see up here are not necessarily for amplification, but it's simply to pick up our product for an internet option. It might be on YouTube later. So a lot of the mics that you see are not for amplification purposes. We aren't making ourselves louder necessarily. The drums aren't amplified. They're just simply being put through the system so that we can have a recording of this event. In case we end up in court, you know, you want some defense. You want some evidence, you know. Yes, sir.
Does the
That's a great question. The question is, does the symphony play with amplification or without amplification? If it's an 85-piece orchestra where you have 14 first violins and 8 basses, no, we do not use amplification. It's plenty loud. These days, because of social distancing on stage, a year ago we were playing with our instruments 6 to 8 feet apart. So instead of 14 first violins, we had 6, less than half. So we brought in microphones so that we could amplify those violins to make it sound like more. So 85, 90 musicians, no, we do not amplify. We have a Pops concert coming up. Both you guys are playing, right? Yeah, I'm not. Whatever. We have a Pops concert coming up a week from Saturday that is, it's called the Queens of Soul, and it's all the music of Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston. It's just going to be a great show if you want to tune in on the internet. No, it's not on the internet, so you'd have to buy tickets, but I would highly recommend it. The playlist looks like a blast. But when we play with a different drummer, who's like probably louder and not as, you know...
Not as cute.
Not as cute, definitely not as cute. But there's vocalists, so you have 3 women singing, so they have to be amplified. So immediately it's like, okay, in order for the guys out in the house to have a nice sound mix, they'll mic the singers, and then they will mic the rest of the orchestra. And every instrument has a mic, and that guy sits back there and turns the violins up, turns the violins down, turns the cellos up, turns the trumpets up. He just does all of that just to mix and make it work. So I'm sorry, long answer to your question, but we do sometimes and we don't sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have time to play the girl from Ipanema? Which one?
Let's do that. No, that's fine. Typically, we prefer that requests are written on a $20 bill and just passed forward. I mean, if you can't play that, then we can't play Ipanema. Sorry. Any other questions before we play a quick chorus of Girl from Ipanema? Any other questions? Great. Okay, we're going to march you all out. Thank you so much. Man, this was so much fun for us. We hope you had a blast as well. Hope you come to the symphony sometime. Thanks very much. Girl from Ipanema from our Girl from Presbyterian.